kind of external appearances, so only perceiving the consciousness. So if you were to say that anything is perceived, it could only be the self-knower, which merely perceives the consciousness without having the appearance of any kind of external phenomenon.
제상 따든지 고아지 레비 킹기 다 지야메 고메디 카시 아니 파게 투게기 시디 센세미 슝레스 리시거
So therefore,
지야메 고암지 타라 세즘 직점들은 냠르샤이기 제 가상이마 중사 디 투게기 시디 센세미 슝
So therefore, for someone who has gotten some kind of understanding here, so in order who has not really gotten a real understanding here, so that person, when we talk about stopping any kind of mental activity, the basis for that mistake, the idea that stopping any kind of mental activity as a means to reach one's goal, well, the basis for one's mistake are the Chittamatra scriptures. So the Chittamatra scripture, that misunderstanding by just perceiving the clarity and the knowing nature of the mind, that is sufficient, that is based on misperceiving the Chittamatra scriptures.
In a sense, tatawadi yonsegi shidi dodi konti seedre. Dodi konti ki nanglo la toni seedi kanti resana nangkada chikwa res. Nangkada chikwa yindang ka residu nangkadi tamche le chabada. 가셔 토레 깍섬 이만하신 도마니 세디 가셔다 고야 가리네 디 깍섬 지당 탐지를 잡아라 했을 도프라는 세고요 디 제거이나 돈이 메가라 샤워 센세벨루레
However, the view of the Chittamatra school is based on the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. And in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, emptiness is described as being like the sky, as being like space, which means that it's all-pervasive and it is free from any type of obstructions or a tangible obstruction. So this quality of being all-pervasive, of pervading everything, and being referring to this absence or referring to the lack or lacking this kind of tangibility. Well, what does that express? Being all-pervasive and being that mere absence of obstruction, that kind of space here, or unconditioned space, well, that is a non-affirmative negation, which means, according to the Chittamatra school, emptiness is a non-affirmative negation.
아니 파게티 딘디지 콤바이나 파게 추기 단생기 신유 카데 따따 차입니다.
네.
디메나 추기 단생을 간테스 뉴그레다 가상긴 기지 신교도서 따지부지게 되모라.
So if one thinks along these lines, if one meditates on this, then it will not become directly an kind of antidote to the mind that perceives the self of phenomena, that grasps at the self of phenomena. It will not become directly an antidote to that awareness. And we've discussed this before, why this is necessary, so we've discussed this further.
다다 파기 주유신다 된데기 최탐지기 돈이 시기도 이네 세점 리즘 된데기다 뭐니까 냠샤기 통데 세점 리즘 된데지를 주니 샤바이나 센점이나 라신다이나 디빈비 주니 가위 주니 칸데슬라 동거든 들어가도 된데기 냠샤기 통데 시리 부바가와든 들어가도 디 주니 있으면 칸데슬라고 다 민다와 차샤 주니 있으니 아니 주니다 주진이도 뭐지 도바다데 있으면 칸데슬라고 나는 뭘 샤고
So saying therefore that this mere clarity and knowing nature of the mind, that appearing that this is emptiness, well then I don't know how if that's explained. Well then in some of the traditions this is explained that way. It doesn't appear clearly to me how this kind of affirmative phenomenon, so the mere clarity and knowing nature of the mind, how that can be emptiness. How can that be the emptiness of a vase or the emptiness of a pillar? And I also don't see how, if that is really emptiness, that kind of affirmative phenomenon, how the emptiness and the basis on which the emptiness is based on, so the basis whose emptiness this emptiness is, so how those two are one nature, so the basis of the emptiness such as the vase, how the vase and its emptiness are one nature, saying that this mere clarity, mere knowingness of the mind, that is the emptiness. So you're saying that.
Tade konde mare. Tade konde insevida. Woji da chedan chejen da chin woji imna ribashi woji mahina tobata di sonye de tade konde inse. Ta tade konde ina sense me luta charwa. Uma me luta ta janji semte na sonwa.
So here, here talking about the mind and emptiness and the object of emptiness being of one entity, of one nature, but different isolates. Isn't that explained in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought? And so yes, this is explained in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. There are 4 kind of characteristics set forth with regard to the emptiness and its object being of one nature and of being different isolates. So there are kind of 4 reasons set forth in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, describing that the emptiness and the basis of the emptiness are of one nature and different isolates.
나 간주셔야지 가르스나 아니 선지이나 창자의 차와다스나 그런 저리 창자의 캬기 요다네스 계속 캬블라나 다 선진 탐지 아니 창장에 있는 고고도 해. 다 선진 탐지 창자나 아니 선진 탐지 상기로 두세 여러래. 선진 탐지 상기로 두 열라나 아니 지 남겨지라 가사 지시는 건 내가 디시도 아니 상기 탐지 내기 받아지 직든지 나좀가 여러 디 인류다 근데 이나다 직한다 그런 지와디 다 섬진 탐지 상상게 막갑del라 다 남가요 말에 아니 가사 셰바요 말에 디미송이다 디미송은 아니 남가요 사우도 두어요 말에 셰바 사우도 두어요 말에 다 군소부 주사도 두어 매 라고 보면 돼 디미송은
So here the question is, whoever is a sentient being, will that sentient being become enlightened one day? If whoever is a sentient being will become enlightened, does that mean all sentient beings will become enlightened? If all sentient beings become enlightened, does that mean that there will be a time when all sentient beings have become enlightened? And if there is a time that all sentient beings have become enlightened, well, it says in the scriptures that as long as space endures, the Buddhas will endure or will abide in this world. But if all sentient beings have become enlightened, doesn't that mean there won't be any space any longer, there won't be any consciousness, and there won't be any conventional phenomena? From that time onwards, there won't be any newly kind of arisen conventional truth. So therefore, from that time onwards, there won't be any space. From that time onwards, there won't be any consciousness.
As a question, was it in the time? And you tell it as it done. And that's him just signed you make it a share. That's him just signed you did that more than a share.
So when he was studying, schoolmates or monastic kind of mates, so in a higher class he debated exactly that. So when all sentient beings become enlightened, will there be a time when all sentient beings become enlightened or not? And if there is, who will drive the car?
아니 심지어 탐지에 상제지 다 딩핑진의 심지어 요마리스 두지 디리샤의 요르베시디 다 같이 요르스니 요마리스의 요레 생의 요레 이세불레게 매 이능이 다단체나 디디 유네면은 내가 시작하면 되는데 신의 가보지 신바이는 신마신은 내가 시작해 도움이
So it is very clear that with regard to all sentient beings have the potential to become enlightened. They all are suitable to become enlightened. That is very clear. But whether all sentient beings will at some point become enlightened or not, this I'm not sure about. So this I cannot really decide upon. And whether then at that time there are what is left when all sentient beings are enlightened, he's not saying, I don't think that's so important to know this. It doesn't seem very important to establish this. It's difficult to establish, and I don't think it's really important to establish it.
아니 가서 그래. 다 가시 되는 도서 가서 그래. 다 심지 탐지 가르사. 그래 심지어 산지가 메스. 나는 달랑이 중인서 디지디야 셈제제제 뭐 기부시 지기도사. 심지어 산지에면은 아니 전주 생기고에 맹인도지 야 디제섬로 공에 용어데 요구유서를 가시 근데 제보의 게임도 돼. 그래서는 심지어 타버도에 매네 산지에 매네 수수강이 세기도 세기유는 미치게 강이 세워 미니유는 인강이 세워 수미유는 숨강이 세워 꼭 강변 지변진의 지혜를마도 차상 다리에유는 안에 신대지기 다 차상 다리에면은 아니 가시르트 지금에 나는 견자를 와도
So, in the same way, well, there's some who say if all sentient beings will not become enlightened, they start worrying about that. If it's the case that not all sentient beings become enlightened, they start getting worried about it. They get unhappy. They feel unhappy about it because they feel, well, what's the point of generating bodhicitta if not all sentient beings can become enlightened? So why to generate this aspiration to become enlightened? But Geshe-la is saying that's not necessary to expect that all sentient beings that one is able to take, or that all sentient beings become enlightened. There's not a reason to give up bodhicitta because, first of all, with regard to one's own problem, one is able to solve those. And on top of that, one person, two people, three people, one is able to help people. So looking at sentient beings, taking them to the same state. So in that sense, even if one is unable to take all sentient beings to enlightenment, one is able to take some to enlightenment. One is able to benefit some sentient beings. And that in itself should be sufficient. So Geshe-la said, I don't see any reason why to worry about the generation or the cultivation of bodhicitta, if not all sentient beings.
因为你不能够解决全部的困难，所以我们就一个困难都不解决。但如果这样讲的话，就变得非常的奇怪。
심지어 산지에 요마를랑이 뒤주기 가려고 알았으나 가르시고래 산지 차례세 뒤주 요마를랑이 디가르스나 심지어 좋아요 말했어. 디라웨 굉장히 가르스나 저 먼저 계시는 체지 요마랬어. 심지어 망용치. 어제 랩투민 기자 많이 뭐지 지단 체지. 체지에나 아는 거 갈리갈리 좋아해 기지 요래. 체주님에나 저 먼저 기지 요마랬어. 근데지 내가
So for those who say that not all sentient beings will become enlightened, the reason for saying that not all sentient beings will become enlightened, why they assert that is because they assert that sentient beings are infinite. There is no exact measure with regard to sentient beings. They're infinite sentient beings. If there was a definite measure to how many sentient beings there are, well then we could say, okay, after one after the other, one after the other will become enlightened, and in the end there's no one left. But if there are infinite sentient beings, there's no end to them in the sense that there will always be sentient beings, even though lots of sentient beings have become enlightened, there are always some left. So this is their assertion that therefore we cannot say there's ever a time when all sentient beings have become enlightened.
다 강해지 가려서는 타메 시디 셈나도 마셔오지 용대 이거.
But there's one problem, saying infinite, countless, beginningless. These words, they don't really, the mind is unable to comprehend this idea. So therefore, whether we say infinite or beginningless, so this is very difficult, beginningless, that idea is very difficult to grasp with our own mind.
기왕아 지고를 심주다 부치디 깔라 아니 버테스 라제 다 기왕아 유다주레 사무라 테스 다 괜찮다 테스 통을 깔라 유나야 디모마야 아니 통화 요 말했지 대부지 큐님이도 다와 같이 지rin데 큐 대부입니다.
So when I investigated, when I personally analyzed or examined past and future lives, I got a sense of, okay, so previous to this life, there was another life. Okay, so before this, the previous life, there was another life before that, there was another life. So I got some notion of what that means. I had some understanding of what that meant, or what that means. And then I continued, well, there's another life before that, another life. And when I got to like beginningless time, that's when I felt uncomfortable. So that's what made me feel like unwell, like this seems really weird, of beginningless time. So this kind of discomfort, this feeling of discomfort lasted for a few months.
정말 열이라나 양식을 내더니 다시 당토도 열이라나 지금도 세일 굉장히 된투 야 요말이라나 대범에 되는지
So saying that there is a beginning, that is contradicted by reasoning. So there's logical reasoning that contradicts the idea that there is a beginning to one's rebirth. But then again, saying there is no beginning, well, that makes the mind kind of feel uncomfortable. It kind of doesn't feel good to think along.
DJ la bagi shebaza mase tutien thoma yomare chi samda chojine. Ani nimaji das re duste ani sharshol das. Also zeman dashi. Dus troshar da sharshol. Nankadil takawa dus. An taji le da ra lena da tuye yobaji le ora. Tuye yobaji le ya tuye yoba khoran la ta du min du ya doshadi. Ya khotame charuda. Ya tongbalena ya nakatame charo. 딜레디 다 나가디 타메버지 셈나 레로 다가 사슴 테네 딩마 데와데 라시 신원에 전에 통화메바다 나가 타메버 들어지에 믿어 들어지에 요마로 나가 타메네 저 통화메를 들어지에 요마로 이네 마데와데 라시 디지디선은 이 디인서레텐 먼저 남주 컨디인의 상황의 체유인지 대링선이로 전부 중중 딘디지로 광대로 하셔버리 타메 세계적인 내용들 엔딩을 내지만 되어지 다단다 나가 타메 세계적인 로버지라요 토마메 세 라바나 로버지라요인데 이 신의 셈날 마테오는 얘기차 디리마도 신의 셈날 마테오 매우 차고 굉장히 동무다.
So it's not just with regard to awareness, only with regard to awareness, that there's a sense, this is weird that there's no beginning to consciousness. It is also with regard to it is also with regard to physical particles, the idea that they have existed since beginning this time, that one cannot posit a beginning with regard to physical particles or physical phenomena. So actually I found this very disturbing initially. However, one day I thought, if I were to just walk towards the east, so I just continue walking. So without, if there's something that I encounter, I may just go around that. So kind of mentally I went walking towards the east. So if I encounter something physical, well, there's something behind that. And then if I continue walking, I can continue endlessly. So if there's only space, of course I can continue on. If there's some kind of obstacle, I can go around and there'll be something else to continue on. So that kind of idea that there's nothing so surprising about being able to go endlessly, that allowed me, that sense of discomfort disappeared, that sense of awareness or physical objects existing since beginning of time. The discomfort that I experienced by thinking about that went away by just imagining you can just walk on and again, and you can just walk on forever basically. That idea with the walking on forever, being able to walk on forever, allowed me to overcome the discomfort. So where does that discomfort come from? The sense that consciousness exists since this time. That is because we're so used to having a certain measure of something being this going this far and not any longer. So in terms of today, this is today, this is tomorrow, this is a year, this is next year, this is big, this is small. We're so used to kind of having certain measurement, as in like it goes from here to there, that idea. But actually there's no reason to feel uncomfortable or feel disturbed about beginningless or infinite, the idea of infinity or beginninglessness, because on the basis of this very simple example of just continuing walking, I was able to lose that discomfort or that sense of feeling uncomfortable with that.
기시 심지 탐지 때 제말에 상계 차례세 주여버이는 그제 다 군주비 취설도 주어요 말에 산지 심지 되지요 말에 균체로를 참아.
So if there's really a time when all sentient beings become enlightened,
심지매나 심지 되지요 말로.
when all sentient
균체로로 다 심지 되지 취송해다.
when all sentient beings become enlightened,
옛날이야.
when all sentient beings become enlightened, so let's say hypothetically there's a time when all sentient beings become enlightened, well then yes, all conventional truth may stop existing. The continuum of sentient beings would stop existing. There would be no one would work for the benefit for, or would not be benefiting anyone any longer. So all this would go out of existence. And the Chinese lady kind of looked at him with surprise, and Gisela was saying, if it was really, if it was, then that would be the
一切的事
consequence.
情全部都
So
中
there
断
wouldn't
这
be
样
any
子。然后我就
convention.
跟老师在劝说中断，我说你要加如果，如果
Homogeneous sentient beings would discontinue, so there would be cut.
这是第二个最新主间的社会性推荐爱真的的那对的。
好像怀疑
So
这
with
件
that,
事情的时候，
it's very difficult. If we eliminate that, if we investigate that, it's difficult for us to come to some clear-cut conclusion regarding
很
that.
清楚了解的事情。
因为但推荐了落成的，前面就程序上的落成的没日这个，可惜这个他第必须当这，那什么了从头这来呀，第各个审核，各个干的审核的是呢，其实他听说唱嘛，然后这个他甚至现在唱嘛，上野菜园那但是，安尼我说了人家接，我真不说了当我，我了他吃着使用过的，他第二对控制唱嘛，他菜园呢。 或者什么上野餐，但我就不太那么热话没多。其实到控制等到上马间的对的热气度，公路员的没呢，感觉热气度一模着。安尼上马间的对的，其实控制一个了牛毛街的，但可能公路没呢，牛毛街的度假企业气度接不差不多，度假企业的东西牛业气度接不差不多，我也那知了。安尼东西牛，但东西牛业气度接不差不多，东西牛业的。 我了年纪节去的，接不着。我了年纪节的，我上节去的接不着。第二的，他甚至唱嘛，但他刚刚用的，全部都叫接的，我上节等到了接不着都上的，唱嘛那样接我来知道，古些来给拆迁的必须等个，但落成年纪。
But this idea, nonetheless, can be used as a training in love and compassion towards other sentient beings. In the sense, if one were to think, if it's possible that all sentient beings become enlightened one day, and I'll be the only one left, what am I going to do? So everyone has already been enlightened, so there's no one I can generate love and compassion towards. There's no one I can practice patience towards. There's no one I can practice morality with. I won't have anyone who assists me, like no one who's like as a friend, like a mate who can assist me. So that'd be really difficult if I were the only one left. So therefore, if I look around, all sentient beings, like Ishila said, those people in this room here, for example, well, they're here for me. So they still abide here. They're still here with all their afflictions. So usually I think, oh, all their afflictions are just there to harm me and so forth, to have a sense of like them wanting to harm me. But actually, one takes this as a training, thinking they have all these afflictions. So even though there's no motivation to have these afflictions, but nonetheless, they still, their afflictions help me. So these afflictions help me so that I can try to eliminate these afflictions. So one is able to generate love and compassion towards other sentient beings who have these afflictions. So their problems and their afflictions are beneficial for me. So thus, one takes this to mind to kind of appreciate the kindness of afflicted beings, of those beings who still have afflictions in that continuum. One sees the kindness of them suffering, of having problems, of having afflictions, because if they weren't there, I'd be totally left on my own, and I probably wouldn't be able to reach the state of enlightenment. So one uses, therefore, this reasoning as a mind training in order to generate greater love and compassion towards other sentient beings, towards those who have afflictions and problems.
Lord 진짜 기반에서 풍보 나도 주바 있고 나도 진바 있고 소소가 다 지와들이 풍보 나도 진바 당 풍보 나당 로직 랑신직 주바 랑신직 진바 등이 이 개발 연구가 있어 개발 차원 연구가 있어 풍보 나도 주바 당 풍보 나당 랑신직도 진바
So in Diggin that she's asking in probably class 8, Geshe spoke about perceiving the aggregates as being the self. So with regard to grasping the aggregates as being the self, in relation to this awareness, she has a question. So is there a difference in terms of coarseness or subtlety? Is there a difference between perceiving the aggregates to be the self and perceiving the aggregates and the self to be of one nature?
타든 기제시용디 풍부 다인버디 담보장 디네 타든 송 레신닝보 나로다 타든 기 송사지다 풍부 러신지 임버디 담보장 러신지 다데다 소바 딘스 담보들 러신지 송 지선 디 송당 다나 풍부 러신지도 다다 러신지도 징바다 풍부 다인버 징바디 다지바 차로
So according to the elimination of the thought by Lama Tsongkhapa, so Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, there you find there's the first with regard to the 7 extremes. So before explaining the 7 extremes, there's first the explanation of the awareness that apprehends the aggregates to be the self, and then the 7 extremes are described. In the eloquent speech by Lama Tsongkhapa, there's first before setting forth the 7 extremes, there is the mentioning of an awareness that grasps at the self and the aggregates as being of one nature. And then the 7 extremes are set forth. So, comparing those two texts, one can therefore understand that this refers to the same meaning, perceiving the aggregates as being the self, and as perceiving the aggregates of the self as of being one nature. That perception is equivalent.
근데 간제 쉬어야 돼 간지나 돈이 무슨 돈 간사기 귤라 왕신아 요다네 아니 기대 연나 아니 가르기 뭐래 나나만의 뭐를 같이 왕신아 원도 귤대 왕신아 요다
하지만我在现证空性
So the question that was asked here, I kind of reformulated it a little bit to translate it to make sense in terms of the translation. So for one who's sitting in meditative active pose and realizing emptiness directly, are the 5 sense consciousnesses there? So are the 5 sense consciousnesses there, and are they active or not? I hope that's in the interest of the person who asked the question. Right? So during the meditative active pose, directly realizing emptiness, there are no sense consciousnesses. So because there is no perception, there's no appearance of any true existence. So therefore, yes, there's no.
Yes.
Then Thailand chola kaza Yusuf Samshu Shila ni ane Temban Yesha Shena tanda so tanda Temba da Sheda da Jikta ji che lo so di wondu chile ma sheba che so dingi zi che yer ta kozo kare service na tanda ta tanda lula me pe Temban Yesha lo so wa de so la dingi zi cho yin san ane so sem di te ji dona ba sha go re ma do ta je che go ya ndu ane 비준 디체네야 돈이 더 제가 세마게 맞게라 소라 디조콜라 디시 큐는도 손자다 탄다지 돈이 도츠지냐 멘다지 요다네 아니 걔들 매일 남나요 도츠시라다 제가 세마 토마도야 될라 제가 세마라 덤고 와지라 도츠지 요다네 아니 걔들 매바이나 양 탄다지 가라다 재미를 받지라야 또 고스티콜라다 나 타일란드에서 재미를 주지 또지 나렌다게 저래나다 고수 lungo들이랑 제바스나 콜라지 남자 큐너요 말에 다지 양 고수 돈이 더 못해도 자기를 또 돈이 지 토마토야 요 말에 그래서 제바스나 남자 요 말에 제바스나 콜라 지 디시믹스 개요 말에
다디 이제 알레크로라
So here the question is, according to other countries like in the Theravada tradition, for example, different to the tradition here where mindfulness does not necessarily have to refer to an analyzing kind of awareness as it is described as being an analyzing type of wisdom or mindfulness. There seems to be more emphasis on focusing the mind, being more focused, and in that way generating the mindfulness of the body and so forth. And on top of that, there's also no explanation of inferential cognizers, which newly realize emptiness. So the question here is, in order to newly realize emptiness, does one not have to depend on an inferential cognizer? And if one does, well, there's a problem then in the Theravada tradition when it doesn't describe these inferential cognizers, because that would mean that they're unable to realize emptiness newly, because there's no explanation, there's no kind of presentation of the inferential cognizer. 我们都可以看到说，好像有在据说说，在泰国等等这样的小乘修行当中，那有人得到正的阿罗汉的果位。那请问在这样一种没有比量论述的这种教义当中，是的确可以升起对于空性的现证甚至正的阿罗汉。
但第一了定制拉过了，可是我这好像也没给重要。그게 돌방고 제마방고 쓰는 계획적인 격 CD 격 계획이냐 격 외제신의 균 장모화지 타고당의 중요할.
So this is something. First, we discussed this early on. That there are accounts of a person who are just reciting 2 lines and just sweeping the ground. By doing that, they were able to attain liberation.
디나신 가정에만 다가는 게 중요해. And 산지 로전 제어를 쓰는 지금이라 로전 제어 말아서 남자 딜라요 거.
So also when people ask, well, likewise, so when someone says, well, do you have to study in order to become enlightened? Do you have to learn in order to become enlightened? And then people respond by saying, well, Milarepa didn't study.
제자한테 밀어 주고 좀 균이 시도해 주냐 말. 그래서는 미디 교황아마 간데 제차유 띵건술을 고주 차대요.
So with respect to one person, we really can't say, we can't really make a direct statement about anyone, because what a specific person has done in their previous life, we just don't know. So to make any kind of statement to be decisive or to decide on what this person can do or not is difficult because we don't know their previous lives.
제자한테 건조 간지치기도 시에 섬로들 니치네. 직디 하장기 제와 체자. 건조 지혜디 견쇼우면데 견쇼가 있나다 건조라가 진실로 저는 되게 말했어. 된지기 주도 지혜지. 직댕이 니주나 주도 지혜지. 직가르가 주도 지혜로. 다 제자 다 제외 톤의 주도 지혜디 니주 가가래 모두 신다디 대점기 다 지당기 계지 시당지래 모두 하기 신주 진행기 다 간다 계지 아버지 라시마스. 대 양라면은 마다위나 디 지도디 시다 제기 디 맹해지래. 알라보다 그것만 통해도 오지.
So actually, when we are concerned about other people, so what are they doing? Are they doing it right or not? Or are they mistaken or whatever? Actually, there are 2 reasons for doing so. One would be out of real care and love and compassion to then see what are they doing, are they doing it right or not? And another way is to see, like, what about like a worldly kind of curiosity, just from a point of view of a worldly kind of curiosity. Of course, if by way of compassion and so forth, then one investigates further, well, there's definitely something commendable. But actually, and he was like, I don't really know how to say this, but he says, I myself, I don't think about this too much. I don't too much kind of try to think of are they doing it right or are they not doing it right. I don't try to concern myself too much with it.
참자마저 졸랭지도 있잖아요. 아니 가신님도 졸랭지도 된데 레고도 뒤는 김제디도 아끼제디 시험도 뒤배 아마 지부터 배때 송고도 내가도 그게 좋아라 다디라 다디 너래라나 내 기부터 뭐들 가동제로 차도도 뒤래도 기제디 짱 시투문도 미신다 키오네 기제 시바이나 아니 원에 가르래래 기제디 세부지 시에라야 같은 수도 미 기자마 시바체로 다 제당 먼저 내다 모아지이나 다 조수수수로 내다 모아지이나 안에 라가 간데서 저거랬어. 근데 지도는 김생 가디어. 디체는 김생 가디어. 슬래네 기지 시바이나 안에 신의 심주디 짱짱ኛ지 용토베를 겨울도.
sometimes when we kind of discuss with one another, it's very difficult to discuss because we say, oh, this person, this sage has said such and such, this kind of special or excellent person has said such and such, and then if we don't agree with this, well, we can't really say that it's wrong because then we would say this excellent, this sage is mistaken, and so in the end, we're not able to really continue our discussion from there. It's very difficult to really discuss it in that way, kind of deciding a sage, for example, someone, a special person. So really as beginners, and we're all beginners, the best would be to just see what is the path, what is it I need to do next, what comes next, to kind of investigate step by step what needs to come then, what needs to come then, to kind of go step by step, and that becomes a very efficient kind of analysis. This can become an efficient kind of examination of what is going on, to kind of start from the beginning and take it from there.
这个只会走这个道路，它会带来什么样的好处？那它会带到什么样的一个结果？那如果要走这条路，我们应该要怎么走？我们把人命去掉，干干净净的去就理路来讨论走法的时候，这种讨论才能够真正的比较就近。
其实他定这个刚才给讲嘛，写不清的都是周围人呐。아니 용 미자 뭐 요인자 대단 디 년부를 미자 뭐 시부지 송여래. 다 미자와 디 참아 아니 같이 하게 다 주수수수는 로라다 미자 님네 진이 요래. 이네 디 탐치기 자와 탈도는 단진의 토요래스. 엔 단진 디세기 탑시디 다 담에도 비시라 모두 요 말에 시에디다 남들 리우니보다 두진 로라. 리버랑 기토네 두셔다.
So of course, from the point of view of different people, there's so many different afflictions. So dependent on sentient beings, different kind of mental predisposition and so forth. There's so many different afflictions, and therefore so many different antidotes to those. So in the different spiritual systems, different antidotes to these different afflictions are being set forth. However, there is no doubt that the root of those is the misperception of reality. In other words, the awareness that grasps at itself. And then the antidote to that, the direct antidote to that, is the mind that realizes selflessness. And that is set forth that the reasoning for that, and this is established or proven in the second chapter of the Pramanavartika, proving that the second chapter in the Pramanavartika, it proves that the only way, the only real antidote to the mind that grasps onto itself is the mind that realizes selflessness.
다 디지디즈나 오나 다음에 또에 되는 컨테스트 오버레스나 다 교환하면 기자 마셔버지 가지 미치기 강사지기 서도 또에를 가르도 오버레스나 엔 다음에 미기 통해요 말 다임 다 무슨기 서도 또에요 말 당분이네 딜레도 다 제가 참아도 줘서 그래요 말
So then when we talk about how to realize selflessness for the first time, so forgetting about previous lives, not even considering previous lives, so how to realize emptiness for the first time? Well, since we cannot perceive it directly, we cannot perceive it without sense consciousnesses, so we cannot perceive it directly initially, the only way we could realize it would be by way of an inferential contact.
第一次就马上就是用现证的方式，所以你没有办法马上第一次用现证，必须要证的话就得靠什么？要靠理由，所以必须要用比量证的。第一次证的时候。
다 제가 처음에 떠고도 경쟁성당에 떠고래, 경쟁성당의 시행고래, 이내 딜레 이 가정에만 라인바, 같이 정신기 기도비를 그럼 요딩이 두스, 바게 로정춘의 제만용이, 같이 등뒤기 로정 제비 경기 양식럼 레딩이 되네 요구요. 디즈비주 당초고. 다 딘디기제 많이나 사바지나 다 장유래. 루리타 다리는 자야마도 다 바게 지용 기차는 기지 쉐바이나 다 루리타리는 장유래 되리다.
So when we think about, when we say an inferential cognizer, well, that is an awareness that depends on reflecting on reasons, reflecting on correct reasons. However, this is something I've mentioned earlier. Some people can do this naturally. They naturally have the ability to come up with the correct kind of reasons, and naturally, without studying, without learning anything, they know the correct reasons, and they're able to then generate such a cognizer. There are others, again, who just in dependence on contemporary and secular kind of study are able to generate the right kind of reasons that establish for them emptiness. And then there's some, again, there's a third category of people who need to study study. We really need to study the reasons that are set forth in the Signs and Reasons and so forth. So in general, there are those who then would need to study traditionally according to the way the Buddhist scriptures are set forth. So the different cases.
The Sanji Yusung Pambursha, and Ribigi Chen, Kijeshe to the Samzana, the Hilavan, Mila the House, Sosole Hausuda. That one thing is on Tobala, Chanjusen Giabores, Lenta Kuna, to the Monguyora. At the Shady, that jet and double washing on Thomas Lenti, Thomas and it doesn't want to have any thousand of that, on Thomas Sally Kesaro.
So if we leave aside the teachings of the Buddha, and then we just kind of think about it ourselves, well then, for example, if you want to take an initiation, in order to have a proper initiation, like a qualified initiation to receive that, you have to have bodhicitta. So if we don't have bodhicitta, then we're actually not able to receive a full initiation. So then some people would be like kind of embarrassed when someone asks, what, you haven't received an initiation yet? Yeah. So if they don't take an initiation, it's embarrassing. If they do take one, well, they're not qualified to do it. So they face this kind of predicament.
So in my original question, I kind of mentioned that just through practicing shamatha meditation, one can qualitatively change the mind. So the mind is no longer the same mind of an ordinary sentient being. I mean, it's still a sentient being, but of a different quality. Qualities can be developed without study or using reasoning. So from that point onwards, with this new kind of mind, using Vipassana techniques as taught in the Pali tradition, other realizations are supposed to be able to be gained.
Are there any? Well, that's the other question I asked.
Is that not that?
It's a different question.
Oh.
Okay, so I can still ask it. Yeah, please. I asked about the infringing cognizant. I asked the question about the infringing cognizant, but I can still ask it. So, can other qualities be attained, right?
No, it's the same question. It's that you develop the mind a certain way using meditation.
Yes.
You don't need any kind of reasoning or study to do that.
Okay.
That's possible.
Yes.
So at that point, you have a more refined mind. So then when you do other kinds of meditation, like meditating directly on the mind, or the kind of meditations as taught in the Pali tradition, you would then develop realizations that way.
So realizations in general, not after.
Realizations in general. So I'm just saying, if you continue that idea, then is it not possible to generate
enlightenment or
impermanence first, then selflessness?
Just independence on that.
Yes.
So the Vipassana tradition, the Vipassana technique.
Not only Vipassana tradition. I mean, you can look into texts in at least in Kagyu tradition. I don't know anything about Nyingma tradition, but at least in Kagyu tradition, they also talk about not having to use reasoning, but direct meditation on the mind.
Okay, so without reasoning. I just have to think how to formulate it. So without reasoning, you're saying?
Yes, without reasoning. Without the correct side.
반드시 해야 될 것이나 하나 스스로 공개해야 되는 심비 띵디 그거도 나타나 김생 삼노와 나왔지 제고 맞지 요가 찍고 지나 난 하버드나 달리기 슝도라이나 달리기 슝라야 아니 반드시 전반에 샤치가 하동지 공수시라 이게 주연하신다 또 조금 더 시샤시는 아니시 공수시라 다디 시샤시는 공나 심비 띵디 저도 현재 사바도 투고시 다 딩수 비치고 윤내지 다간다 코야 가규 총나라 양된지 수요르사 가규 초라다 아니 발리기 쇼나나기 제바지는 고와체라야 아니 가래 미타보도 투리다메 도트로 데다 오지 고군요레 근데 인베다지 소소 조금 치고 치네 샘디기에 연딩 칼로다 공배도 넣어야 디게체는 아니 갈래그레 가서 미타보도야 다메도야 여르게
다랭이를 미다버스에 간디질을 시그레 담에스에 간디질을 시그레 니를 알티 셴고봐 아니 신의 담에스에 칙칙을 된주서 뭐야 다 담에스에 가장 잡아는 지야 이름을 집어 공인데 담에 돈이 민다고 동상 대সম을 동상 지샤 로 동상 지샤르게 로다 샤르와 대성도 또바스는 민다 근데 제가 아니 딘디기 담에디 또야요래 다 또세디 코샤르와 좀 민다 버래 담에세디 딘디기 아니 나와 탐지 가드비 동상들라 돈이신 민다 버래 민다 수디온도 제가 또야요래 아니 데르와다.
So first of all, we need to see what is meant with impermanence. What is meant with impermanence? What is meant with selflessness? What is the actual meaning of those ideas? So we've heard this before, that there is an explanation that stopping any kind of mental activity, that is emptiness. Now, if this is what one calls emptiness, one gives the label emptiness to that mere absence of mental activity, and then if one is able to do so, one says now it's emptiness. So this is how it appears to the mind. But we're talking about something specific here, because selflessness has many different meanings. Emptiness has different meanings. So if it's just that kind of emptiness, yes, by just stopping any kind of mental activity, that state of mere empty, that state of pure empty or complete empty, that can appear to the mind independent of that.
含义呢，跟我们在说的其实很不相同，所以你必须要先说明清楚你在修的无常，你在修的无我到底指的是什么意思。
지단에 리벌레 장고를 시뒤 쯧거래 파이처로 쳐거래 딘딜라고 말다.
So when I say in general thinking of reasoning, I'm not talking about going to the debate and studying the scripture in that kind of traditional way. I'm not talking about that kind of formal type of study.
단다 넘버 참만기 투몽기 다메디 다 풍불이 된심이 다 매버세들이. 그래서 풍불 된심이 다 매버디 다 겁네. 뒤에 조금 장밖에 저도 말해. 다 집에 대해서 지고 제단데 거기서는 빼나 류기 지주네 강틀기 봐도. 그러. 다 파기 자 같이 규바 같이 샤 같이 차 같이 내다 찾아. 지 파기 무슨도 통하는 신진. 미버때 디지 류테만 샤래. 두진이 차상 전에다 하나 다들 오늘 전에 등산다 야부 있어라. 파기 출첵이 뒤어라. 뒤다 아니 신이 뒤잖아. 강들이야. 디 차상 집에 세부 쉬우지. 파기 류내다데 미기 통하는 신. 직접. 디네 야세데만 샤 검제 아니 셈 시디 셰바스 라라지만 임바 되샤 시다 디모 카리키기도 디디디디 딱지 세부지 못쳐용데 아니 나세야 간이들에 나도 다른 같이 네 용대에 통또 대디 류디기디다 아니 셰바 디게디 마도 신다지 민두아 삼바지 다음에 뭐 무슨도 통하다 말해 무슨도 통해 소저지 도스 리고 딜레 경쟁지 조사 유나 다 세품불이 로스 유나 다도 따용디 디타레 세 주주주지 그발래 디고구미도 아신다 셈나로는 디토고 칸라네 말라네 제가 디 콘틴지디기 류테만이 샤다 센데 녀샤 코메디기 품불이 된심이 다음에 뭐 또에 펜토고도.
So, with regard to, for example, what is the sense of selflessness that is accepted by all the different traditions, the idea that there is no self that exists as separate from the otherness. So, only doing stabilizing kind of meditation, or shamatha, or stabilizing concentrated meditation, it will not be possible to really get an experience of that. There needs to be some kind of reflection. So, some kind of reflection, one needs to engage in that. So, for example, one takes the body, one goes, when we talk about mindfulness of the body, so you go through your body, you swipe through, you kind of take your mind through your body, and you look at you start at the crown of your head, and you go through all the way through to the bottom of your feet. So you're examining it. It's an examining kind of awareness. Where is the eye? What is it? So you become aware of the blood, you become aware of the blood vessels, you become aware of the flesh, the muscles, the bones, and so forth. So you basically examine your entire body. So this is a type of analysis. This is not a stabilizing meditation. It is a type of analysis that you go through. So it becomes very clear. Your body appears to you very clearly. I mean, nowadays, of course, it's even easier. Which, let's say, you have machines that help you to actually become aware of what is inside your body. But anyway, doing this kind of reflection in this way of contemplating your own body, then it's like as if you saw your body with your own eyes. It's that kind of clarity that appears to your mental consciousness. And after you've done that, now you engage in the mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of awareness. awareness. So with regard to the mindfulness of the mind, well, we're not just talking about the coarse type of mind, just awareness of consciousness, but looking at all the different types of subtle types of awarenesses. So there is desire, there is anger, there are all these different types of consciousnesses. So therefore, when one comes to see that no matter what, through one's own experience, whether one looks at the mind or one looks at one's body, these different types of consciousness, the different types of the body, none of us, there's only those, there's not a real self that can be found. So it's almost like when one realizes that the selflessness directly, it's not really a direct perception of that, but it's very clear. So if there was something there, it would have to be there. But by way of engaging in the mindfulness of the body and the mindfulness of the mind, engaging in that kind of examination, one is then able to realize that there is no self that exists as separate from the other.
真正的升起，对于刚才讲的离欲我的这种离欲无我的这种初分的无我的正德，它不是叫做正德离欲无我，可是这种观修方法呢，可以帮助我们正德离欲无我。
刚才念了大面的菜的要先我的啊，但白个除了听我给大面，你讲的深圳的大面。안주 비타민, 탄주 비타민, 이 주체들이 만나러진 다다지 신, 좋아. 이 신비토네, 아니 신에, 아니 답름들을 때는 답에 같이 또 그랬어. 안 뒤어디 땅에 신주체나 세부시부 차루와.
So first one needs to understand what is the measure of selflessness. One needs to know what that actually refers to selflessness. So then one takes the common selflessness as explained in the Satantrika school or the Bhagavad-gita Satantrika school. Then one looks at the explanation, the common explanation according to the Chittamatra school. Then according to the Madhyamika Svatantrika school. And eventually according to the Madhyamika Svatantrika school. And then understanding these different types of selflessness or modes of existence that are described here, then one looks at the methods, the means to how to realize these states.
다 디신비 토네 단다 그나 우마다 세면슝도스 다 남제 류니바레 우마레 다 당고 장뒤다야 또 스리바드스에 다 직결샤면서라마도 알레심 딩 수게지 무슨 고통면도 남상 간들 리바 유에딩인지기 오늘은 동행이 자와 탈투나 당진도 투당 안 다음에 이나 인루 안 다음에 공부할 때는 탈 당진 유모도 좀 세당 이 세비진이 동행이 탈당 이게 리베 주시 침바파 가지제는 제여 유에딩인지기 공기 제도구도 오만다 세는 흉나 된
So then with regard to the Madhyamika scriptures, with regard to the scriptures on pramana, so in particular here the second chapter of the Pramanavartika, when initially studying these texts, these scriptures, it's a bit like just reciting these texts. There's no real, it doesn't really affect the mind in a very profound way. However, if one then applies these reasons, one really takes those reasons that are set forth, one can come to understand the awareness that grasps onto the self, and how it serves as a root. It is the root of all the other afflictions. So how it induces these other afflictions, and how the direct antidote is the mind that realizes the opposite, that is the selflessness. How that mind overcomes this misperception, that grasping onto the self. How it eliminates it, and how it really liberates the mind from that misperception. So it is through these different types of reasoning that we really get to understanding in such a way of the methods to overcome this root.
那一旦我执被消除掉之后呢，它又是如何的可以把烦恼给消除掉？真正一个学懂理路的人，他对于刚才我们讲的这个部分的论述，就是烦恼的根本为什么是我执？那正德我会为什么可以把整个我执跟烦恼给完全消除掉？中间的这种关系理路，它可以非常清晰的指出。
但哪个这个地方啊？但哪个这个但取决现在以内这说的所以呢，这差不多每个的多，但我给每个早全部过不的。다디 참상다 아니 기주만 볼래 마시 기주 찍니는 마도 마시 되네 맹아 되네 아예 먹고 쉬는 되네 짜치고 쉬고 되네 찌대 되네 도와 초진의 뒤에 디기 톤에 아니 간데스 아니 거기 유모 내버서도 그래 디기 톤에 동네에 땡도 간데스 탈도 그래 제시시라 매딩이 되네 용되기도 디지도 있잖아요 다 가와 줘다 수수다 주다 초지들 뜻이 침부 제요래 다가를 두고 임에 양 초지들 다 뜻이 매버지 이내다 디자 침부를 공부를 다 기제 든지 유화로 하다 이나 유도 뜻이 개매버지 다 이번시나 가르치게 다 가서 딜을 두고 임에 딜을 저는 간디스 갈 많이 저신서 말
So then I got to the top. So